Hey friends, my name is Roger Reinert, and I'm your host today for Good Talk. You know, one of the things that I absolutely love about calling Duluth home is that we are a big small town. And there are all sorts of things that happen all around us every day that we know something about, but we don't know a lot about. And so the goal of our podcast is to delve more deeply into those topics. The services, the people, the events, the activities that make this such an amazing place to live, work, and call home. So thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to a great conversation, and we'll dive right into the next one. Well, hey friends, you are tuned in again for our podcast, Good Talk. I'm Roger Reinert. I'm here today with Shane Bauer. Shane's the executive director of Grandma's Marathon. Shane, I thought we'd start just by talking a little bit about your story. Like, how did you end up connected with Grandma's? And I know you've played more than one role over that time. So,
yeah, it started in 2001 with the marathon. I mean, I moved here in 1999, and it didn't take long to realize that Grandma's Marathon was kind of the big event in town. I worked at the Duluth News-Tribune, but I did run the half marathon in 2001, and then I mean, that's quite an experience. Very, very emotional at the finish line. I struggled. I mean, I had some knee issues. Yeah. Didn't train as much as I should have. Yeah. All those things that I know much better about now. But it's that later that fall, the position for the what eventually became called the design director and expo coordinator became available, and I applied and started in October of 2001 in that regard. And that lasted till 2007. And then I resigned and started my own design business and events and things like that, and came back as executive director in 2015.
Okay. And I think that's something maybe a lot of people don't know. Like, you have this artist graphic design background, and people know you as the face of the marathon, the executive director, but that's another whole part of you that maybe not everybody knows about.
Yeah. And it's that's always, I guess that's what I'm trained in. So that's where it started. But one thing leads to another. I was always into writing. Yeah. That's a part of the job, and there's other things. But once events gets in your blood, that's about it. You're probably you're probably in it for the long run at that point.
Now, is Grandma's our biggest event? It's a signature for sure, right? So maybe a little bit about kind of the history of Grandma's Marathon, and then we might talk a little bit about like its impact in our community.
Yeah, it is. It's the biggest annual weekend event by far in the region. So I guess you could put it that way. Obviously, we got Bentleyville, which is big over the course of a season, and some other ones out there. But as far as one annual weekend, there's really nothing else that can happen on that weekend. For example, in the pandemic, I mean, we couldn't postpone it to another weekend like a lot of other races did during that time, because you just can't.
Sheer volume of people.
Yep, hotel rooms, hospital beds, all that stuff comes into play. So it's pretty interesting. But the famous story, of course, is 1977 when Scott Keenan and the North Shore Striders had the idea to do this, and went hunting around town for $600 without much luck. And then finally Grandma's Restaurant Company said, we'll do it. And we'll give you the $600. That was the budget for the first year.
This has got to be the best marketing investment anyone ever made.
That's
right?
what everyone says. Yep, for sure. Money well spent. And that led to, 150 people or so finishing, and it just grew within 5 years. It was already into the thousands.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
It's just the perfect recipe for a marathon, with all things considered. And today it's over 20,000 signed up, over 20,100 as of yesterday when I checked.
Okay.
And a $20.6 million impact on the community.
Over like the
1 weekend.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So how are things looking for this year?
Full.
Yeah.
Robust. Yeah. It's a big one. It could be a record.
Okay.
It's filled faster this year than any other year in history, with the exception of 2016, which was the 40th anniversary. And those anniversary years always see
because the half fills up right away, right?
Yep. Everyone has a chance to get into the half now. Okay. It's worked out really well. It fills in about a month.
Okay.
So it's not like you have a great excuse for missing out anymore. Okay. If you're on it And when registration opens, you should be able to get a spot in the half. But then we do end up turning a lot of people away between November and June.
I think I heard the 5K is full.
5K is full, and that's been since we've moved the post race to Bayfront and done more around Bayfront with the 5K as well on Friday night. We've been able to grow that race, and that one's over 2,700 people now.
All right.
A lot of people don't know that. The 5K is actually another really big event.
Yeah.
Especially when you're running the Bay Walk, and through Canal Park on Friday night of marathon weekend. So.
Yeah. And that really kind of, most people think, well, that's the start of Grandma's weekend, but it isn't really. I mean, there's things happening even in advance of the Friday night 5K, right?
There are. Yeah, we have the Rudy Perpich Award, which we give to local public officials who have helped out and played integral roles over the years and things like that. But I do think that the 5K, we have the kids races and then sort of why Young Athletes Foundation.
Which I got to help with last year. It was so much fun.
That is a blast,
doing laps in Bayfront, and you're just trying to run with them and encourage them. Some of them are very, very fast kids.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a big turnout there this year. But to me, the 5K Friday evening is kind of the peak of the excitement. The night before the race, I think everything's just buzzing at that time.
And then Saturday evening is the great Duluth high school reunion.
Sure, yeah, the great get together, the party.
Yeah. Who's online this year, or who's on deck for music?
Actually, possibly the bigger name band, especially if you're from down south in cities area, is Arch Allies, and they're on Friday night.
Okay.
So all those 5K finishers now get a drink ticket as well and can stick around and party. And of course, it's open to everyone, and it's earlier, so and away from the hotels more now that it's at Bayfront, so you can kind of enjoy that and then still be up and ready for your race the next day. But otherwise, we try to mix the local acts. Everyone wants to hear music they know. We've found, so we've tried different things, and really it's just good cover musicians ends up being what we get the best feedback on. But we've got Rafe Carlson, he's local down there this year. Laura Velvet, GB Layton is back. I mean, he's in the Grandma's Marathon Hall of Fame after the many years. Rhino is headlining, and they've done really well in the past for us. Rockabilly Review's been opening the day at 9 a.m. for quite a few years now, and it's kind of become a new tradition. So, and Buck Wild, and they were, I think, down there last year to fill in sort of a country slot. All right.
Great lineup. So as you think about your years of involvement with the race, I'll ask you a couple questions. If you have like a favorite story from a runner, like I'm sure you encounter hundreds, thousands of people over that time. And then also what's been like the, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. You can take those in whatever way you want.
Yeah, it's different every year. The runner stories are tough because if you've spent any time at the finish line, it is one of the most emotional things to experience. I mean, I'm usually in tears at some point when you see what happens down there. And it's so inspiring. It's got so many other people trying to run and getting into this event.
And it's not just like the super fast person who made a record,
not at
right?
all. Yeah, well, sometimes. I mean, Dakota's been a great story. We're all big Dakota Lindworm fans. And, with her grandpa being at the finish line last year and things like that. But I get my sort of memorable moments from the volunteers and the experiences I share with them around organizing the event. The one that comes to mind first is actually 2016. I think it was 17 when we had the gear bags are always something around the logistics of marathon weekend that
is this what measures whether it's a successful marathon or not? Is the gear bags?
How well did the gear bags go?
Yeah.
And they ran out of room on the trucks, and so they just threw all the remaining gear bags on one of the buses at the end of the half marathon, start. Yeah. And sent them back to town. So I had to meet that bus with I had a Toyota Tundra at the time, and I met him on First Street and just kind of parked right next to each other somehow. And it doesn't look like much on a bus, but I unloaded all the gear bags from that bus, and by the time they got into my truck, the entire box was full. The whole back of the cab and passenger seat, and I could hardly shift.
You're Santa's sleigh at that point, right?
I could hardly see even because it wasn't like one of those hot years, but it was enough work where I was just drenched and dripping, and I couldn't see out of my eyes because there's so much sweat pouring into my eyes. And I had to drive them myself down to the finish line and then unload them in time for when the half marathon finishers start coming through.
As assigned, right?
Yeah, it's just, I'll never forget the chaos. I mean, we were throwing those gear bags into that truck like mad. I mean, you would have had to have seen it. We must have just looked crazy.
Yeah.
But it's all timing. If something goes wrong, with those early events, it really affects the rest of the day.
Sure.
So you got to make sure that stuff gets done.
And I have to imagine with an series of events as big and as complicated as Grandma's is, I think of maybe the most comparable thing I would have is maybe some of my Navy experiences. You have all these wonderful plans, and then you put humans into the equation. And then it's just like, how flexible can I be? You're making decisions on the spot, like throw them in the bus. Like what options do we have right now, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you're exactly right. And Grandma's Marathon has a great reputation for being one of the most organized events of its kind in the country, but it just doesn't matter how much planning you do. We work on it year round. You just got to be ready to adapt, because there's always going to be that one thing, often weather related,
sure,
that you try to plan for, but you just can never see every scenario. So I always say that's the first thing we look for in our employees, is the ability to adapt,
be flexible,
yeah.
Semper Gumby. And how big is the staff that puts on all of this? It's pretty small staff, right?
Yeah, we're 9 full-time year round. It's more like 10. Right now, we've got some transitions going on and some people kind of learning the ropes and things like that. But we do really ramp up this time of year. We have seasonal employees, construction crew for when all the tents start going up, and it does expand. We've got subcontractors and things, but 9 people working full-time year round pretty much.
Wow.
Yep, put on the event.
So now there's a key group that makes that possible, right? There's something called volunteers, which amplify your 9 staff and make all of this happen. So talk a little bit about how important volunteers are for Grandma's Marathon and Grandma's Marathon weekend.
It's probably one of the most important by far. We've got a lot of stakeholders, sponsors being one of them as well. That's very important. The runners, number one. I mean, essentially they're your customer, but creating that experience for them depends really on the volunteers. And that's one area where Grandma's Marathon shines. The world-class event, small town charm, is kind of the perfect tagline, because that small town charm and the way this community comes out is really what makes it, from what we hear, what keeps people coming back. And we have one of the highest retentions in the country, about mid 30% or so. So
of
returning runners,
okay.
Because they want to do a marathon in every state, or they have all these different things, but when they come here, they want to come back to this one specifically and do it over and over. And
so 30% are maybe doing it every year. Or
yeah,
it's a
over
regular,
30. Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Yep. And that's high for our industry for sure.
And you think that a big part of that is just the Duluthians who volunteer and give them just a really great experience of being in our community?
Absolutely. I mean, there's over 4,000 needed to make
volunteers.
This happen. Yep.
Wow. Folks, 4,000. How are you doing on the 4,000?
Well, we're not there yet.
Okay. So people, if you are interested, here's a great opportunity. And let's not lose the chance of, and how would someone say, hey, I want to volunteer?
Just call the office. The marathon office number is easy to find, or email Olivia at grandmasmarathon.com. She coordinates the whole.
Right?
Yep.
A-L-I-V-I-A.
With an A.
Yep.
Yeah, but that's really so these runners run marathons around the country, and they're often major metro areas if you're running a marathon of this size. Yeah. Then you come to Duluth and have this completely different experience where the entire community is about you running.
Yeah.
And they feel like celebrities when they come here, because it's all about Grandma's Marathon. You can go to another marathon and take a taxi, to the starting line, and that driver might not even know there's a marathon happening,
right?
Even though they're big, it's just a different.
But here you're out somewhere Sunday morning, and people are like, "Hey, did you run the race yesterday?" Right? Like everyone's just engaging in that conversation.
Or even more so, they'll just ask you what your time was or how you did, because they just know you ran the race. You know, if you're wearing running shoes.
Yeah, right.
It's
likely
really
you're
cool.
wearing your shirt because that was hard earned. So.
Yep. Well, true. Yeah, for sure. It's a great experience for them, and it's really driven by the volunteers.
And I would say, I've had a chance to both, before I really got active as a runner, volunteer along the course. And as you said earlier, talking about the finish line, even on the course, you're just inspired by people that are out there. You're inspired by some that are like, oh, wow, she looks fast and is having an amazing race. And then you're inspired by somebody who is like clearly not fast, but they're clearly giving like everything they have this morning. And you always like, I always wonder, like, what's the motivation? Like what is inspiring you to kind of put yourself through this experience? And everyone has a story. And, for those who might consider volunteering, I've always found that's the most fascinating. Like, why are you here? What's bringing you to Duluth? Why do you want to run Grandma's, the half or the full? And people tell you these most amazing stories that, like you said earlier, like half the time you're like, that's so great. Okay. I'm going to be watching for you tomorrow. I'm never going to see you in 10,000 runners, but it's really uplifting. And I think my favorite thing is I usually volunteer in the hospitality suite in one of our hotels. And so there you're 100% dealing with visitors who are, maybe they've come before, maybe they're new to our community. And so not only do you get to hear their story, but you get to tell them about Duluth and like give them your favorite places to go and things to do while they're still here, and just be a really great ambassador for Duluth.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of fun. I always say finishing is winning. Just focus on getting to the finish line, but enjoy it on race day, because you've put in the training, and I feel like that's where all the benefits are coming from.
Yeah.
You've done the work. You should be feeling good. It's obviously you've seen benefits, probably physically, mentally,
right?
Probably even. And on race day, these volunteers are out there lining up trolls on London Road and making bacon and
right.
pickles and beer. The college kids are down there with the keg sometimes. And
one day I'm going to fun run so I can do all those things.
Yeah, and I can't endorse any of that, but I would encourage everyone to take part in all that and just have fun with it, because it should be like your victory lap is kind of, especially after the experience I had, I guess. I would just wish I would have not been so set on a time and just enjoyed it. The event itself.
Yeah. So I want to ask, how did you survive COVID? I mean, I'm sure you knew it was coming, so you had all the plans in place and knew how to. No, of course you didn't. I mean, but an event that is predicated on thousands of people coming to a place and being around each other, we've seen in many other organizations and events, like they didn't make it. So can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like for Grandma's?
Absolutely, and great question. That was not easy. But we come
from understatement of the
century?
Exactly.
But we, and I think one of our board chairs, past board chairs, said that our approach was relentless in getting people back out and running. Because if you think about our mission as an event organization that does these races and the social and charitable and wellness benefits that comes with it, it's the number one thing you need at that time when everyone's locked down. And then just to combat, just for general wellness, to be able to combat, sort of sickness going forward, is being fit and healthy. And so the one thing we really need to be doing is cut off from society in a way. I mean, it was just a really ironic situation from my personal perspective anyway. So it took at least a couple tries with the city of Duluth, who was just trying to follow state guidelines and national guidelines, to get a plan through for the Park Point 5-miler.
Okay.
Which ended up being one of the first races in the country to come back
out of
COVID.
Okay.
And we came up with a system where one person starts every 5 seconds. You never probably came within 20 feet of another person the whole time. We had it spread out over an entire day in blocks of 250 people. And we came up with this system and put it all in I think it was an 8-page document to explain how we were going to do it and what protocols we were going to have and how we were going to keep people safe. And the city finally approved it. At the same time, we were working alongside the state Department of Health and all that stuff too. So we had a good idea of what they were looking for, but that ended up kind of becoming a model then for other races to follow. And then you saw, I think, in Minnesota, Twin Cities Marathon, or Twin Cities in Motion, say wasn't far behind with doing a very similar model down there, which started open up racing. And actually, in the end of June here, we're winning a national award for the way we handled COVID.
Congratulations.
And kind of got this background. God, I'm getting a little emotional there just talking about it.
Wow.
That surprised me.
That was
It's so nice to be done with it.
Yeah. Well, and I would think now to be a couple years later and you're seeing record numbers, and like that could have been the break time. And not only did that make this event go forward, but as it sounds like the award is acknowledging you helped lead an industry and show them the way, how to move forward and how to be safe about it. And I can remember that Park Point 5 miler, but what I also remember is that fall then was Fitkers, which is normally a spring event, but now you had a thought for how we can do that as well, and got that back in. And
good memory.
I remember a staggered start and masking until we got going. And so congratulations and kudos on not just helping ensure this thing that's so important for our community. I think you talked about the 20 point something $million in just a 5-day period, but also the entire industry. And coming out of COVID, people being more active, had that gone away, you wouldn't have that great connection between those two things. So, great, challenging time, but also rewarding time to be in a leadership role, I would think.
Yeah, thank you. And it is, I think, a leadership award for our organization from others. There are peers throughout the country. So, and I'll go down and we'll get that in, I think it's down in Texas.
Okay.
San Antonio is where the conference is at. They'll be presenting that. But I think you're right. I think that had a lot to do with the next year then coming back at half capacity. I think some people were still leery about travel, but then last year, full capacity. And this year, I think, is finally going to be the full-on, everyone's showing up. I mean, there were some travel costs that rose last year, too, that I think deterred some people. COVID was still technically lingering.
Yeah.
This year should be the big, full, exciting return. And a lot of other marathons aren't seeing this.
Oh,
so I think that this all has had an effect on ours having the success that it's seen this year.
So I know, Shane, you and the team are always evolving, and no 2 years are ever the same. What's new this year that you're really excited about?
New? Well, the YAF Festival for Kids on Friday is we had it last year, but we had it backwards. Everyone leaves after the whippersnapper races because then they want to go get their own packet. The kids had their fun.
Right.
So we got all these great activities going on over there. But this year, that'll open at 11 with all those activities so people can come enjoy them. Then the races are the headline act. You go run and with the kids,
get your packet.
They're happy. Then you go about your day and the parents get their packets and start gearing up for the next day and go to the spaghetti dinner and all the different activities. Otherwise, the 5K is we don't just add 500 people to an event. We slowly gauge it and make sure we can handle it and spread people out and that everyone's safe and it's a good experience. So this will be by far the biggest 5K we've had. Last I checked, it was well over 2,700 people. So we have to do that in waves, obviously, with the Baywalk and some of the tighter areas. But it's a tour of Canal Park.
Yeah,
and
it's a fun course.
It's a little bit tweaked to handle that again this year. That's new, but it's not even going to be really noticeable. It's pretty much the same course as last year.
Okay.
So, but otherwise, the whole Bayfront move is still a shift that we're working on. We're moving the family meeting area back to Canal Park because that just didn't work at Bayfront, things like that. The return shuttles, big one for the runners, aren't going to be at Bayfront either. Those are going to go back to Railroad Street by the main gate of the deck there on the north side. It just makes way. So stuff like that, but no real huge new things this year, but always a ton of initiatives. Always working on new things around it.
Now, before we end, we should say that this isn't the only thing Grandma's does. There are other events throughout the year, right?
Correct. Yeah, the Young Athletes Foundation, which is kind of our internal charity arm and thank you back to the community, has events year-round. And they're all fundraiser races, and then they fund our programs, which are a lot of the kids' events we do. They're always free. and open to everyone. And we're able to do that because of the YAF fundraisers we have. But yeah, there's a shoe program. We provide shoes to every cross country and track team for those 2 seasons, every high school in a 5-county area.
Wow.
And then we have a grant program where any nonprofit focused on keeping kids conscious of a healthy lifestyle. And it's a very flexible policy we keep,
Yeah.
They can apply for grants up to $3,000. And we've opened that up to not only physical wellness now, but anyone focused on mental wellness as well.
Okay.
Because it's just such a big part of it, and running has such a big impact on
So
these
any
things.
race you're participating in, you're helping support those efforts too.
Absolutely, yeah. We got good partners. All 3
Excellent.
shoe stores in town, the independently owned ones, are great partners of ours. They have events. The whole running community is, as well as
Yeah.
anyone, a very tight group, and it's a
Super
pretty cool
supportive.
thing to have here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thanks, Shane, for being a part. Again, folks, if you're interested in volunteering, there's still time and there's still a need. So we'd encourage you to reach out to the Grandma's office and let them know. You will not be disappointed. Shane Bauer, Executive Director of Grandma's Marathon. Sure appreciate you taking time to chat with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. And College of St. Scholastica, this is really cool. Thank you both.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today. You've been listening to Good Talk. I'm your host, Roger Reiner, and we look forward to having you with us for our next conversation.